Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. Over the past several weeks, we've seen a lot of headlines out of Washington, D.C. about cost cutting and staff cutting, and in Congress, focus is turning to agriculture. Last week, John Newton, the executive head at Terrain, had the chance to testify in front of the House Ag Committee, and he joins us today from Thief River Falls, Minnesota. John, thanks for speaking with us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Glad to be here.
You spoke to the House Ag Committee about the challenges in agriculture. John, what are the big factors that you wanted Congress to hear about in farm country?
Well, the title of the hearing was the economic crisis in agriculture. And when you look at the USDA's farm income numbers, while they may show farm income increasing in 2025, it's actually on the back of near historic levels of ad hoc support. $42 billion of federal support is expected to flow into agriculture in 2025, helping to boost incomes. But when you look at the crop sector in particular, very, very tight margins for the third year in a row.
That is a struggle, and of course, the industry is doing this without a farm bill. We are in the extension of the 2018 Farm Bill. John, is Congress going to have to write a whole new bill this cycle?
Well, that's the goal. The goal is to get a farm bill over the finish line as soon as possible. I'll actually be visiting with Chairman Thompson and the leadership team next week on Capitol Hill to brief them again on what's happening in the farm economy, to really provide that sense of urgency on why we need to get a new, modernized and improved farm bill over the finish line for agriculture in rural America.
Now, these farm bills, John, they are big pieces of legislation, $1.4-ish trillion expected to be in this farm bill. Do you expect the 2025 version to be substantially different than the version we had last year in Congress?
Well, farmers across the country have been asking for a meaningful enhancement to the risk management tools that they depend upon, your ARC programs, your PLC programs, and that is going to cost money to make those improvements. And when you think about how much the ag and conservation related pieces of the farm bill actually cost Americans, it's about 8 cents per meal. So ask any American if they pay a little bit more money to make sure that farmers and ranchers have the risk management tools they need. And I think the answer would be yes.
And when you were speaking with the members of the Ag Committee, did they seem to understand the gravity of the situation currently out here in rural America?
Absolutely. Democrats and Republicans understood the challenges that farmers and ranchers are facing. Some of the new freshman members of the committee have reached out asking for additional information, another briefing. So here at Terrain, our Farm Credit Partners, we're excited to engage with those lawmakers, help them understand what's happening in rural America.
There's a lot to come, John. As this farm bill begins to take shape, what should American producers be watching in Washington, D.C.?
Well, certainly there's no shortage of issues happening in Washington, D.C. I think all eyes are obviously on the DOGE team and what they're doing at USDA and how that ultimately may impact farmers and ranchers. It may impact the farm bill. So things are very, very fluid. But the most important thing is for farmers to be engaged. We now got a Secretary of Agriculture who can defend agriculture in the Oval Office, and that's critically important.
It is indeed. John Newton, Executive Head at Terrain, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us this week.
Thank you so much.
Our market segment this week is brought to you by Farm Progress. Explore the website for essential information and innovative solutions at farmprogress.com. Now it's time to dig into the markets. Joining us this week is Mike Miner with Professional Ag Marketing of Laverne, Minnesota. Mike, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, it was cold across the northern Corn Belt this past week, but the corn market stayed pretty hot. Mike, we're seeing a lot of these contracts, at least into the midsummer, hit $5. Is there still room in this corn rally to run?
We're struggling a little bit. If you look at the corn market, we took out $5 on the March contract for the first time in like 16 months. Huge feat for futures this week. And really, this market's been led and started by fund money flow piling into this corn market. And that started back in about July, August, when we put in our lows and traders got a little bit more concerned with inflation. And they've continued to do that. And now we find ourselves at a position with 350,000 contracts net long almost on corn. And, we've got a little bit more room. You could run that thing. You could trade weather. But if you are going to trade another 50 cents or a dollar higher on this corn market, you're going to need a weather problem this spring for certain, I think. And other than that, I think we could be a little bit quieter now for a little bit after the initial Trump trade had started off, but it's still choppy. And now the market's going to have to figure out what to do with good demand, a shrunk balance sheet a little bit from what we've been seeing, and fund money flow.
All right, and it won't be long before we start talking acreage seriously when it comes to what's ahead for this growing season. Mike, are you doing anything on that 2025 crop corn as of yet?
Yeah, a lot of activity here this week. Once we got above this 475 range, you start to really talk about producers above their break even. I mean, even if you take basis out, you get a cash price around 440 or above. That really is around that area where people can start saying, you know what, I can kind of make a little bit of money at this level now. So we are starting to see some done there. But otherwise, at this point, it's been a lot of options, a lot of windows, things that it's only February. And typically February isn't the most seasonal best time to take risk off the table. So we're in a crop averaging time frame right now on crop insurance as well. And we'll see how that goes. But producers are getting a little bit short off of that alone, Mike.
All right. Well, let's talk about the wheat market, because we've also seen additional strength coming through from the wheat as that has continued to rally. But this week it seems as if that might be getting a little toppy. Well, what's your thoughts here on the Chicago wheat market?
Well, the wheat market, in my opinion, has been incredibly disappointing. Ever since Russia and Ukraine went into war, we've just went down for the last 2 years on wheat prices as Russia's financed their war on cheap wheat export sales into the world. So hopes that we could end that war sometime quickly is very beneficial, I think, to wheat prices, which some people may not think that to be true, but at least I do. I think that would help the U.S. become more competitive globally. And I think looking forward here, we have had some struggles with U.S. weather here recently as well in the southern plains that have helped a little bit of a spark. But at this price level, it has been incredibly undervalued on the wheat complex. And the one thing I've noticed is when funds have come and covered up their corn and soybean shorts, they haven't been doing that yet on wheat. And they just started recently to cover up some of those shorts. And as that short covering occurs, I think we could have a little bit more leg room on this wheat market. But we've seen some pretty dramatic days already, haven't we, Mike?
Yeah, we certainly had. That market has been volatile, to say the least, recently. Mike, interesting thoughts there on what peace could mean for the wheat market. Folks, we'll have more with Mike Miner of Professional Ag Marketing when we return. Their firm specializes in helping folks hedge their hog market risks. So stay tuned. We'll dive deep into what's ahead for pork producers. This Week in Agribusiness is recorded in the Strauss Studios. For more than 70 years and 3 generations, Strauss has been manufacturing high-performance, German-engineered workwear, work boots, and safety equipment. Prepare for the next growing season at Strauss.com. We're back talking markets with Mike Miner of Professional Ag Marketing. And Mike, we didn't get a chance to discuss the bean market in the first segment, so I wanted to get your thoughts there. We've been watching this thing bounce back and forth. Where do you see it going with respect to South American weather?
Well, South America here, pretty much gut slot harvest. I mean, it had a really wet, delayed start, and that wasn't a surprise. I mean, they had to delay it planning at the beginning of their harvest, and then it's just rained and rained and rained. So the quality concerns have been quite real out of China, or out of Brazil going into China, and that's delayed those exports a little bit. But over the past few weeks, I have seen U.S. basis levels drop along the river, and we've seen a little bit of picked up activity out of Brazil for exports as well. So I want to continue to see that with a massive crop there that they're going to have to get rid of. I mean, they're creating a record-sized crop, and there's no doubt about that. It's just the quality concerns have been an issue. You know, they are used to combining really wet soybeans and drying them, but it's worse than normal. And weather-wise, you know, Argentina, really rough week this week. We're probably going to have good to excellent ratings drop here this next week, but I would expect that, you know, Argentina's downfalls are getting made up by Brazil one way or another. And it's going to be tough for that harvest pressure to not hit our markets at some point. I'm really surprised that, you know, from a seasonal time frame that Going in, Trump goes into the White House and we rallied the soybean market $1.50. And now Brazil's combining a record-sized crop. So for me to think that, we've got a little bit more in the soybean market is very hopeful. But we've rallied a long ways already, Mike, at this time of the year.
We have, Mike, and of course you work with a lot of producers securing their needs for soybean meal, which has seen pretty exceptional volatility since December. What's your advice to folks looking to secure their meal supplies for the summer?
Well, the meal prices have been relatively low. The really nice part is that with higher lean hog and cattle prices and with low soybean meal prices, we've had fantastic opportunities to lock in margins on just a straight crush, sell hogs, buy meal, buy corn. And it's been really simple from an input perspective on that front because we can kind of pick and choose when we want to try to sell hogs, and then we can just couple it on the other side with the crush. So from an input perspective, meal around $300, sure, it's a pretty easy slam dunk most years at this price level when we pull back. That's been a pretty easy decision, especially mainly just because the crush margins, the margins available for the hogs have allowed for us to take that long on.
Well, let's talk about that hog market. Mike, of course, you work with producers all across the country here in hogs. We've seen a pretty incredible rally over the past 6 months. Is there still gas in the tank to keep this hog market moving?
Well, the hog market, the great story has been pretty much everything. You've ran on all cylinders on this hog market. Demand has been great domestically and exporting wise globally. So it's been a fantastic hog market that's just ran on all cylinders. And even as we started to talk about tariffs, I mean, we really didn't see a pullback on these lean hog prices because of Mexico or China or Canada and the trade news surrounding Trump's presidency like we did last time, mainly with soybeans. And really this time we didn't see it with soybeans as much either. So that's been a positive for this hog market. But this last week, we noticed something a little bit different. Even a week ago, it was still pretty good. Cash was good, demand's good, cutout ran up to $100. And then something changed a little bit in this hog market. We've just been plateauing, kind of going sideways, consolidating. April futures around $94. And I think tariffs are finally weighing on that market a little bit. And you can see it, from a basis perspective, it really suggested we should have ran a little bit higher on this hog market this week, and we just didn't give it the chance to. And when you go so fast, so hard in the hog market, seems like you can destroy demand a little bit easier than what beef can. For example, like beef can go up to $300 on choice cutout, and you don't seem to lose that much demand if the American consumer is financially healthy. But pork, it seems like you pull that back a little bit quicker. Yes. And there's a few other things really going on, Mike, too. Like we could talk about egg prices and all of those things, but demand is still good. It's not a bad market. All things are still pretty good here, but the Mexico situation's got funds trading it in a tough spot.
All right, we'll be watching these headlines to see what could move these markets further. Mike Miner, Professional Ag Marketing, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Well, there's no shortage of weather headlines this time of year, and Greg Solier keeps an eye on them all. Greg, it was calm last week in the Pacific Northwest. Yep. Is that going to continue?
It should. Yeah, no major storms out there this week, but boy, it was a world of hurt along and east of the divide with that cold wave weather pattern of last week. And many a locale here across the Saskatchewan that were down close to 40, 45 below zero actual air temperatures. At Lemon, South Dakota, 42 below. Broken Bow and Valentine in Nebraska over that heavier snow cover, thank goodness, right around 30 to 31 below actual temperatures. And we'll put probably about 60, 70, 80 degrees on that. It's a big turnaround here. Wind blowing one across the plains, and again, a pretty docile weather pattern across the Pacific Northwest. So a little change there. A weak system approaching, a couple of showers later into the week. Some snow showers across the northern Rockies. Slightly cooler air up near the Canadian border and a fast-moving clipper system. And heads up on these winds. They may vary in direction as the days wear on, but through some of these mountain passes, when you get this downslope Chinook weather pattern that gets temperatures to moderate and warm. Those wind gusts could hit 50 and 60 miles per hour plus across the mountain passes. Into the southwestern states we go, plastered with sunshine. High pressure though here, the clockwise flow maybe back into Santa Ana conditions in Southern California. Warm for the ball clubs down there in spring training in the desert southwest, and coming off the frigid weather last week across the plains. Sunshine, temperatures back to and above seasonal levels, but again some expanding dryness and drought. But we've had some snow cover here, which will be melting away quickly this week across Nebraska and the areas of Kansas. Hopefully some moisture into the grounds there. No significant weather systems at all. This system will blow on by the southern plains back into warm, dry, high pressure across the southwest, and same with the valleys of California.
So it sounds like the northern Corn Belt might get some relief from those cold temperatures of this past week.
Yeah, if you try to do the math here, you need your fingers, your toes, hands, and everybody else around you to count the change that will go back to readings about 20 to 30 degrees above average right behind this warm front. Maybe a few flakes of snow to the upper Midwest. Windy weather through the Great Lakes region, a return to seasonal temperatures, Ohio Valley, and then better than that, this is readings that will put you in an early spring bow, the first of a number of false springs this season, folks, for the Plains and Corn Belt locales. Maybe a couple of sprinkles for the middle and late parts of the week across the Corn Belt. Snowflakes up towards the Sioux. Slightly cooler air, nothing like we saw last week on some of those sub-zero cold readings here and here. A very mild weather pattern over the middle to late portions of the week. And coming off the moisture as well, which was in the form of snow again down to Dallas, Fort Worth, Oklahoma City, and points out of the east. It's a windy and milder go of it across the southern plains areas. Little, if any, organized precip into the early parts of the week. A fast-moving system may generate a couple of sprinkles in some areas through the Delta region and points out of the east, but otherwise a very quiet weather picture for outdoor work and catching up on livestock duties in the southern plains.
Greg, does this mild outlook stretch all the way to the Atlantic Ocean?
It certainly does. Yeah, it's a complete 180 on the pattern shift around here. Early parts of the week, here's that warm front, maybe a spot of moisture into the northern Great Lakes region, and temperatures are on the cold side for the northeast of New England, but in absence of any winter storminess. How about the snows all the way through Virginia and to the outer banks of North Carolina last week? That gets your attention. Those will be melting away quickly as milder air works back into the eastern states. A few sprinkles and snowflakes middle to late parts of the week. Eastern and southern Corn Belt back into windy seasonal temperatures and above over the western and northern complex. Mike, a very quiet weather picture expected across that part of the country. Meanwhile, in the southeastern sections of the country, you have frost and freeze all the way to Texas, Gulf Coast, New Orleans, the Panhandle, at least central and south Florida missed it. A couple of showers here. Temperatures recovering nicely for the Delta, southern plains into the Ohio Valley for the early and middle parts of the week. And again, little, if any, organized moisture. Couple of spotty showers and thunderstorms breaking out southern Delta, mid-Atlantic region. Those rains last week and the snow were appreciated from a dryness and drought standpoint. Couple of showers down through Florida, back into mild to warm and dry weather for the southern plains as the week wears on.
At the National Farm Machinery Show this year in Louisville, Kentucky, we had the chance to tour the booths and to see what was new in the world of ag technology. Many farmers were on hand looking for that next piece of innovation, and many of the companies were trying to show how they were doing things differently. We were drawn to the Beck's Hybrids booth because they had a series of corn plants seemingly growing in the air. We asked Steve Gawk to describe what Beck's was doing.
So Beck's is based out of central Indiana. We're actually the third largest seed company in America and the largest family-owned seed company. So we get the opportunity to work with the Beck family every day, and really we consider ourselves all a family of employees. And so it's a great place to work as we all get the chance to work together, do a little bit of everything. I tell people we're kind of just a big family farm from that aspect. And so very close-knit and based in faith.
There you go. As you look out to 2025, Steve, what's hot at Beck's this year? What are people talking about?
Yeah, so in 2025, the Root Reveal project is our biggest, kind of hottest project. We've got our practical farm research and our agronomy, but Root Reveal has been that new fun topic. And really what Root Reveal has become for us is we've managed corn from the ground up for a long time. And yields have been going up, but what happens underground? So we really started to play around with creating these chemical totes, growing an individual corn plant in each tote with dry zorb in it. So we're watering it, letting those roots grow unrestricted, emptying that tote out so we can see the root structure. And what we've learned is there's three types of roots. We got horizontal roots, balanced roots, and what we call vertical roots. Now, there's not a right or wrong root system, but we're learning how do you manage each one of those root systems, whether that be fertilizer applications, nitrogen, population. There are some differences that we can start fine-tuning for each farmer.
For folks that are curious about diving into the Root Reveal project further, where would you send them for more information?
So come to a field show, come tour a Beck's location. We'd love to talk about it. But really, we got some great videos on beckshybrids.com. Get in, take a look at Root Reveal, watch some of those 3D videos, and really getting it in depth in what we're learning and what questions now we're starting to ask.
Steve, that practical farm research you mentioned, Beck's has been doing that for a long time on farms across the country, and you're set to continue into the future. Is that right?
Yes, practical farm research has been a big part of Beck's. Actually, 2024, the data we're talking about today, 60 years of PFR. So it started when Sonny Beck came back to the farm. So that's very exciting for us, and it's what it is. Practical farm research. Everything from closing wheels to fertility, planter attachments, foliar feeds, fungicides. Now we're up to 12 different locations that we do studies at, over 1,000 acres of practical farm research studies. We test about 150 different products and practices in those, trying to find which ones can become PFR proven.
Steve, thank you so much for filling us in on what's new at Beck's. We always appreciate it. One more time, for folks who are curious about learning more, where would you send them?
Yeah, talk to your local Beck's representative or check out beckshybrids.com.
Thank you, Steve. Sometimes it's nice to have new ways to visualize this information. And in fact, if you're looking for new ways to get your weather information, our very own Greg Solier does a monthly 30-minute podcast on feedstuffs365.com. And then twice a week, he provides updates on that same platform to the forecast he gives weekly on this program. And he joins us now with a look at what's to come in the months ahead as spring gets here. Greg, how's March going to shape up?
It's going to be a busy one here. Wide-ranging temperatures and the cold air still lingers over the northern reaches of the country. Some semblance of almost summer-like heat and warmth over the southwestern reaches of the country. You stir it with the jet stream and you come up with late season snows, big sky country, northern plains moisture for much of the eastern and southern Corn Belt into the mid-Atlantic region. Concern here through Texas and into the southwestern reaches of the country. Mid-March, the cold air intensifying. Many fall springs ahead here. Look at the cold and look at the warmth, and this buckled U-shaped trough right here means a stormy weather picture across the heartland, Ohio Valley, late season snows for the upper Midwest, parts of the western Corn Belt, back into sections of the Rockies too. Heading on through late March. Anything but a March feel here, more like February. Look at the cold across the Great Lakes region all the way down to Dixie as well. Stirred with the jet stream and no warmth. You get this late season snows for the western Corn Belt, upper Midwest. Lots of moisture off to the east, including severe weather in the southeast, Mike, and moisture too into the Pacific Northwest.
Now, do you anticipate a warm up as April gets started?
Yeah, in quotes, if you will. Temperatures will moderate here into the Great Lakes region, but back to normal at least in a swipe through the heartland. Look at the warmth building and heat that is, by the way, over western reaches of the country. Still showers and thunderstorms for much of the eastern Corn Belt. Some planting delays and fieldwork delays, late season moisture into the Pacific Northwest. This is again a concern down through the southern reaches of the country with the absence of any organized moisture. Temperatures ease down into the northeast New England heading through late April. Warmth over the southern plains and southwestern reaches of the country. Still no shortage of moisture, Mike, for the Pacific Northwest. Much of the northern and eastern Corn Belt down to the mid-Atlantic region. Expanding dryness and drought, southern plains and points westward.
How if we get planting into full swing in May? How do things shape up?
Again, no shortage of heat in some areas. Western Corn Belt, perhaps there. Heat wave weather across the western reaches of the country. Look at the cold into the northeast New England. And we've got showers and thunderstorms. Plenty of moisture, Mike, for much of the Corn Belt and mid-Atlantic region heading through the month of May up through the Canadian border country. And look at this here. More dryness, more drought over the southwestern reaches.
As we get into summer, does that pocket of drought concern you, Greg?
Yes, it is. That is the big story here with very hot weather from the plains of the southwest, the eastern flank of the Mississippi Valley. At times, we do get these lobes of cool and cold air moving on in. And so you get this scenario, the showers and thunderstorms and the storm clusters over this particular part of the country into the Pacific Northwest, some moisture, but expanding dryness and drought to include the plains, the southwest, into sections of the Corn Belt too. Moisture will be above average down through Florida. That's the thinking, Mike, as we head on through springtime, and some thoughts on summer.
Well, thank you, Greg. Again, check out Feedstuffs 365 for his forecast. And folks, stay with us. When This Week in Agribusiness returns, we'll be talking about the changing economics for grain storage on your farm.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. After last year's big crop, more farmers are looking to store grain on their farm. Recently, I had the chance to talk with Scott McKernan, the Senior Vice President at AGI, about how their company is looking to meet farmers where they need them.
So AGI has gone through a bin standardization process. So we've taken the best bin design and enhancements from our two different lines, consolidated them into one to make sure that we're delivering a really high quality bin storage system to farmers all across the United States that is focused on safety and efficiency.
Okay, and what's been the response so far from farmer customers?
It's been great. Our dealers are very supportive. They understand that this is a tough ag economy, and we've got to be delivering solutions that are cost effective for growers so that they can decide what they're going to do in this challenging market.
You mentioned those tight margins, the challenging economy farmers are facing. At AGI, when you think about storage, how does that change in an environment like this, and how can AGI help farmers maximize their revenue?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's really important to have a really good farm plan, so understand what you want to do with your storage today and for the future, Mike. So review, repair, replace, right? So we advocate that every grower gets with the dealer out in the market. We've got a vast, really great dealer organization. These guys know how to plan for the future. So for growers to talk about what they're trying to accomplish, what their purpose is, let dealers build a plan for them, not just for today, but how they're going to operate 10 years down the road, and make sure that they don't do something today that they got to spend more money on tomorrow to like remodify that. So that's really, I think that's key. AGI is making sure that we've got parts all across our warehouses across the United States. So if repairs do need to take place, we've got parts ready for them. And our bin operation, along with the rest of our factories, we're optimizing our manufacturing, so we make sure that our lead times are as short as they can be to take care of growers when they need it.
All right, Scott, now a lot of times when you get into something and you think, boy, I need to make some repairs in here, that can also be a good time to make upgrades if the operation needs it. On the technology front, what's AGI bringing to the table for farmers this year?
Well, I'll tell you what, we lead this industry in bin monitoring, and we believe that every bin, whether it's a new bin or an existing bin, needs to have bin monitoring. So like the best technology is protect what you've got. So if you're going to store it, make sure that you understand what's going on with it, and don't take it for granted that you might think you know how to turn on the fans and when to turn them on. Let technology do that and drive that from weather stations that understand what the air is like, what kind of air you're trying to pull in, whether it's wet air or whether it's dry air, to accomplish the conditioning that you really need to take place with that product.
All right. Scott, as we think about the global economy, agriculture is connected to it, truly multinational all the way through. For farmers looking with maybe at some unease at the global trade situation in the year ahead, is there anything we need to be doing now to make sure our farms are prepared and the companies we work with know what our needs are?
Yeah, we're partnered with our dealers to make sure that our equipment, number one, is safe for farmers, because safety's first, right? We get safety right, then we can get into making sure that we're ready for the crop that's coming. But let's be safe first. So our equipment's designed that way. We lead with safety at AGI. Our dealers are really good at coming out and evaluating what's going on with your farm. Make sure that your bin is ready, right? Make sure your floor is ready. Make sure that your fans are in good condition, your unload system. So everything inside that bin, that once you close it up to put grain in it, it's ready to go. Our dealers have got great solutions in that stuff, Mike. Again, it's why we're carrying parts like at all of our facilities out across the United States to make sure we've got stuff available to do those upgrades and those repairs when they need them. Make sure they're timely and cost effective.
Our thanks to Scott McKernan, Senior Vice President at AGI.
Greg Sodier is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Earlier in the program, Greg mentioned next week might be a little more mild, but there's still some chances for precipitation. Greg, who's going to see that?
Primarily over about the eastern third of the country, really from the western Corn Belt back to about the Divide. Little, if anything, going on when those winds up aloft are running west-northwest to east-southeast coming off the Rockies. You just dry out the atmosphere, no moisture at all, until you tap into some of it through the Gulf Coast, the southeastern states, and up the eastern seaboard. Maybe a few sprinkles and snowflakes into parts of the Mississippi Valley. Otherwise, from the Divide and westward, late in the week, the following weekend, signs of some moisture working on in. But overall, very quiet weather picture here as we welcome in meteorological spring, the beginning part of March.
Well, as that first week of March kicks off, Greg, do those mild temps stick around?
By and large, they continue on here. So we've got this warm ridge here. Don't get thinking it's going to be springtime and summertime. We can talk about the meteorology here with time, and a lobe of cool to cold air still lingering over the northeastern part of the country. Moisture, not much to speak of. Again, central and southern California, remember, we talked all winter time and part of the fall. There wouldn't be much going on here. This is going to be the first of an expanding drought pattern, expanding and worsening to the north and northeast. But below average moisture into much of the Corn Belt, a little moisture for the southeastern part of the country, organized snows northern New England, the northern states into the Pacific Northwest.
What do you see for the week of March 10th?
Here comes your fall spring in a temperature shot like this. These polar vortex warbling around. Here's the next lobe carving out this trough over the middle part of the country. Cold over the north, warmth over the west and southern reaches of the country. And you get this, Mike, the return to an active weather pattern. Pacific Northwest, the heart of the Corn Belt, and points to the north and northeast. Some moisture for the southeast, but still high and dry southern plains into the desert southwest.
The week of St. Patrick's Day, Greg, does that cold air stick around?
It sticks around. Maybe dress in blue because you may look that way here, chattering away the teeth in this cold wave weather pattern. This is something we're going to have to deal with here much of the springtime season. Fast jet stream, the compaction of temperatures as well. Spring officially beginning on the 20th at 4:01 in the morning Central Time. And here we go with a stormy weather pattern. Snow for the Pacific Northwest, northern and central Rockies into the northeast and New England. Watch the severe weather over the southeastern states too.
Our Farm Progress Update is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of high-quality, high-capacity field grain belts and augers. Visit Brandt.ca for more. It's time to talk about what's moving in the world of agriculture, and Farm Progress editors have a tendency to do that constantly. Joining me this week is Bruce Blythe. He's the senior editor over at Farm Futures. And Bruce, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you for having me.
So this past week, we got the release from the National Oilseed Processors Association about their soy crush. How did the data compare after last December's record-breaking crush?
Well, it was down a bit from the record in December, but still very high. It was a record for any month, frankly. 200.4 million bushels crushed in January. That was down about 3% from December, but up 8% from January 2024. So crush pace is still very strong compared to year earlier levels, and that reflects a real acceleration in plant capacity, new plants opening up, crushing for soy oil to serve biofuel makers.
Because that's the thing, we've heard about this expansion in the soy crush for years, and now it seems like it's actually the rubber's hitting the road. Bruce, is that an accurate assessment?
I would say that's accurate, yes, and it's being reflected in the numbers like you're seeing from NOPA. So whether that pace can continue this year, difficult to say. One issue with the soybean market is while the crushing has been strong, the exports have been slumping, as the South American crop comes available here, and I think that could. You got two opposing forces on the market.
That's the thing, Bruce. It's those two opposing forces that make these markets interesting, and it's creating questions as we get close to the planting season for the U.S. Crop. USDA will have their Ag Forum next week, and that will be our first look at acreage, correct?
Correct. From USDA. USDA has an outlook forum every year around the end of February. Last year they released corn and soybean acreage projections that weren't too far off from what they ultimately ended up planting. 91 million acres of corn versus 90.6 is what we ended up with. 87.5 million acres of soybeans, and that was a little higher than the 87.1 final. So not too far off, and I think that's going to give could be a potential market moving kind of event because like you said, this time of year we're focusing more and more on the spring planting outlook, and at this point it's looking like farmers are going to be leaning toward corn.
It certainly does. Do we have an acreage guess, Bruce, from Farm Futures yet?
Well, a CoBank survey indicated that a plurality of respondents are looking for 93 to 94 million acres of corn, 83 to 84 million acres of soybeans.
Okay.
I've heard and read estimates as high as 96 million for corn, which could produce a monster crop. And even if you take the midpoint of that average 93.5 million acres, based on last year's yield, you do have a crop well in excess of 15 billion bushels.
Lots to watch as this market moves forward. Of course, Farm Futures, a great place to do that at farmfutures.com.
Absolutely.
Bruce Blythe, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. I hear every now and then from some of you that you don't just look at your tractors, you work them. A gentleman came up to me at the farm show, the National Farm Machinery Show, and said, "Hey, Max, we take our old tractors out there into the field and we work them." Well, I have an example this weekend of such a tractor from Missouri. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Lundell Plastics. Farmers, start your planting season off right with the protection of poly-based products from Lundell Plastics. Visit the website to see all of the products they have, lundellplastics.com. Well, yeah, some of you do work old tractors yet to this day, providing some kind of a service for you. That can vary greatly, but here's a Ford still pressed into use in the Missouri Ozarks. Glenn Howard has this tractor at Thornfield, Missouri. That's a little bit northeast of Branson. But that tractor for many years was in southern Illinois, Mount Vernon, Illinois, about 5 hours away. I would imagine that tractor sold for about $25,000 back in the day, back in 1979, when that almost 70 horsepower tractor was sold. Glenn R. Howard owns that tractor at Thornfield, Missouri. We're not sure where he is this week, but we know he's right here with us, Mr. Big Iron Auctions. Mark Stock.
Well, hello, Max. We're going to finish off the month of February with some outstanding machinery auctions and real estate auctions. And we'll start March in Denver at Commodity Classic over the weekend. On Tuesday, February the 25th, a very large sale for Ronald B. Small Trust, Monroe City, Indiana, featuring 66 items. 12 are late model John Deere mechanical front tractors. A John Deere X9 1000 combine. 2023 year model John Deere 1775 24 row 30 planter, and many more items. Also on Tuesday, February the 25th, Anderson Family Farms retirement sale from Odell, Illinois, 28 items. There's a John Deere 9360R four-wheel drive tractor, John Deere S670 combine, 2022 year model John Deere 6145M mechanical front tractor with a loader. On Wednesday, February the 26th, the David and Cindy Peakey retirement sale by Newman Grove, Nebraska, 151 items, a John Deere 8410T track tractor. They've got grain trailers, skid steers, discs, tillage tools. You won't find them any nicer. And on February the 27th, the Lamond Lessman Estate, auction by Broadwater, Nebraska, features a John Deere S660 combine. And don't forget the No Reserve 2-day classic car sale, March 3rd and March 4th. Visit Sullivan Auctioneers and Big Iron for more information.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. This week, we're getting to know Tucker Rorick. He's serving as the South Central Iowa Vice President for the FFA. And Tucker, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about the type of agriculture you grew up in. Did you grow up on a farm?
Yeah, I did. My mom was involved in cattle growing up. She showed cattle all through her life. My grandfather on my mom's side actually owned a livestock publication called Livestock Plus Inc. And then on my dad's side, he had pigs growing up. So I personally grew up on a swine farm. I grew up showing pigs, working on a fair to finish operation.
And now, of course, you are serving in leadership of the FFA. And what was it that made you want to serve the organization?
So I remember my freshman year, I was practicing for the FFA Creed speaking competition, and I had an advisor. They told me that a leader is someone that makes more leaders. And that kind of stuck with me. Obviously, it's a super simple quote, but it stuck with me. And I realized that in order to make the next generation of ag leaders, it's important that we help and support the next generation, make sure to teach them about agriculture and help make those new leaders. So even though it sounds super simple, it's just something that I think is kind of important.
That's fantastic. Tucker, as you look out forward, do you hope to make a career in the ag industry?
I do, yeah. I'm currently majoring in animal science at Iowa State University. I'm not sure the exact route that I'm going to take, but I do know that agriculture holds a special place in my heart and is definitely going to stay in my future.
We'll definitely need passionate leaders going forward. Tucker Rorick, thank you so much for speaking with us this week. Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by AGI, supporting your expertise with industry-leading grain handling, storage, conditioning, and monitoring solutions. AGI, we're right there with you. Chad Colby joins us with secrets to keep your phone in check.
If you're like me, it's hard to figure out what do you do with your smartphone when you're in the cab, and maybe that cab's in the combine or it's in your pickup truck or semi. If you go to your local retailer, there's tons of different options of ways to mount your phone. Certainly it depends on whether your phone's in a case or not. And obviously, if you got gloves on, a lot of these devices, well, if I'm being honest with you, they're not very easy to use. Whether that's in a cup holder or some type of device that suctions to a window, that doesn't make it easy to use. Well, the majority of the ag industry uses Apple phones. And if you don't use an Apple phone, you can still utilize this technology. And they're utilizing a magnet to attach the phone very quickly and easy to the mounting device. As you can see here, I have several of them. I've kind of landed on that middle one, but if you go to Amazon, there are tons of these to pick from. And the reason why I wanted to share it on this week's tech segment is I've had a lot of comments here the last 6 months or so about this mount in my vehicle, because as you can see right here, it's just super easy. Even though the phone has got a leather case on it, to mount it in my vehicle, I just simply set the phone up there and it works. And I wanted to show you how simple this truly is. As you can see here, I did some testing this fall. There it is on the window of a tractor as I was helping some friends of mine out. Here it is again back in my vehicle. You can just set the phone up there. This particular one allows you to rotate it either direction. It pops on or off. There's a little button and a battery in there that manages that little suction pump, which I thought was a little weird to begin with, but here's where 3/4 of the way through winter, it's super nice because as the temperature changes, obviously that pump will turn on. The nice part is if you want to take it with you, you just clip the button, and if you want to relocate it somewhere, as you can see right here, I'm going to put it up in my rear view mirror. You can do that in just a second, and it's super simple. So if you're looking for a different way maybe to mount your smart device, this thing works really well. And if you're a Samsung user, it comes with a magnet, so it can work as well. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Now, Chad says you can find these mounts on Amazon or at big box retailers, and they're generally going to run you between $20 to $30. With planting season just around the corner, the team at Corteva Agriscience is gearing up. Recently, I spoke with Ron Geis, market development specialist, about what he sees farmers needing in their corn seed for the 2025 growing season.
The seed that we're selling now will also contain the Vor seed and the Power Core traits. So not only does that help us with insect protection, which is really important, but it also enables 4 different herbicide classifications on that seed with the Enlist trait, the glyphosate, Liberty, and then also what you'd call FOP tolerance, or the ability, if you can imagine, Mike, the ability to control volunteer corn in your cornfield by using the right herbicide classification there.
Making it easy this year and also into the future. That is a fantastic tool. Now, of course, as we think back on last fall, Ron, harvest was dry. It was warm in a lot of places across the Corn Belt. Does that raise concerns about nitrogen this spring?
It does. Nitrogen can always be a problem. And last year, certainly across the upper Midwest, we had 8 to 10 to 12 inches of rain in April and May. So we suggest that farmers protect their nitrogen investment with N-Serve when using anhydrous ammonia, or with Instinct if you're using liquid or urea or hog manure.
But if we've got a quality seed bed and adequate fertility, we're going to have a lot more than just those corn plants trying to grow in those fields. What are your thoughts on weed control this early in the season?
Well, if it's good to raise a crop, it's also good for a weed crop as well. What we found, Mike, that's giving us the best results is a 2-pass weed control program. Start with a good, solid pre-emerge herbicide. We're recommending either the Keystone brands or Resicor brand at planting time. And then come back post-emerge with either a second shot of Resicor or our new Cairo herbicide, which also has the ability to knock out existing grasses at the same time as it's knocking out the broadleaf weeds.
Diseases across the country. What are you thinking about in terms of diseases this far in advance of the growing season, Ron?
Tar spot found its way into the United States, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, over in Indiana, Ohio, and it's spread its way all the way over into the Dakotas and Nebraska. So the hybrid selection does make quite a difference on tar spot, but it's a very aggressive disease. So we recommend using a foliar fungicide. Approach Prima has a very good track record on tar spot. It has as high a rating as any foliar fungicide, while not costing nearly as much per acre, and also giving protection against the perpetual problems of gray leaf spot, northern leaf blight, and then rust.
Let's think about diversity. We continue to hear about new modes of action. Is that worth investigating for the average grower across the country?
We certainly talk about mixing up your modes of action. Mike, there hasn't been too much new in the last 30 years in weed control. So we have to look at other ways to diversify against these weeds. So no-till is sort of a natural thing, but sometimes tillage has to come in order to help manage weeds. Over the last 25 years, we've completely gotten away from inter-row cultivation. I think that would help manage some of the weeds, and then things like cover crops to help keep the weeds off balance. All of these diversifications will just help us keep on top of the weed problems anyway, and put a profitable crop into the bin come fall.
Thank you, Ron. There will be lots to think about in the 2025 growing season. And thank you for joining us today. Be sure to catch us next time, right here for This Week in Agribusiness. Have a great week.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.